Namaskar everyone. Welcome to yet another session of Yes Talks. Today we have with us Dr. Jyotsna Agrawal. She is currently an associate professor at the Department of Clinical Psychology at NIMHANS, Bangalore, where she has also done her MPhil and PhD degrees. She is a consultant for several services in the institute, especially along with being the faculty in charge of VIPRA, which is the Vedic Indian Psychology Research and Application Division, under which she runs two clinics, Sattva and Swasthya, for enhancing the well-being as influenced and inspired by Indian psychology concepts. Her research interest includes Indian psychology, yoga and consciousness studies, positive psychology, preventive and promotive approaches towards public mental health, and psychotherapy. She's a recipient of many awards and prestigious fellowships throughout her career. And currently her work includes projects which are designed for application of Indian psychology and positive psychology in the clinical and community setup. And in the same area, she has several publications and also been guiding a lot of MPhil and doctoral students in the field of Indian psychology. We welcome you, Dr. Jyotsna, and really looking forward to your talk. Welcome once again. Over to you.
Thank you, Aditi, for this opportunity. You and Ramesh sir have been running this wonderful program, and I'm really honored to be be here and share some of the thoughts. Thank you so much. I'll try to share the slide. Sure. So as I was saying, that as a believer in this presentation, I do bring my subjective experiences, a bit of its biases in the questions which I ask and the answers which I find. So it's important to remember that there are more perspectives out there, and this is such a, in one way, personal topic that everyone would have a perspective and which is equally valid. So then I will move further. About my first person background, I have a kind of connection with divine in my own way. And there is this famous poet, Bhakti poet, Kamalkant Bhattacharya, I would like to have a relationship with Divine Mother, for example, with the kind of deep intimacy which he talks about in his poetry. For example, he has written a poem about, is my mother really black? And it's a very beautiful, very rich in its imagery. But when I think of Divine Mother, she seems to be too awe-inspiring in her splendor. And it seems like Krishna seems to be more available to relate on a personal level for me. So this kind of differences led me to exploring psychologically the processes as well as the changing relationship which I share with God since childhood. And what are the factors, what are the variables which kind of influences that? And I wonder if other people also relate with that. And this presentation is somewhere related to that. So before that, spirituality is seen as a personal search for the sacred, and hows and ways of building that personal relationship. And it is related to transcendental as well, existential concerns, for example, meaning in life, purpose in life, etc. While religion is seen as more organized, socially shared pathway for connecting with the sacred and has ritualistic external component, there is a close association with culture. So for example, Buddhism, if you see, has gone to different countries, and in each country, there is some amount of intermixing with the local culture, and therefore has changed, and there are newer forms of Buddhism which has come up. And some of them have actually devotional component, which were not part of the original one. So however, it's important to remember that religion, spirituality, though there is significant overlap, there is also differences. But in the field, although these differences are discussed, but they are used interchangeably, the terms. So here in my presentation, you might come across the components from both. Looking at the modern trends and what the research has shown, so there is a variety of perspectives.
And there's a differentiation between the prophetic and non-prophetic religions. For example, prophetic ones, which has like the specific individuals who are prophets, specific books and historical events, which are very, very meaningful and very, very significant for the followers, versus the non-prophetic religions, which doesn't have the same. Similarly, there is a differentiation between horizontal versus vertical spirituality. So, for example, the horizontal is like, which is more like this worldly concern related to nature, humanity. On the other hand, the vertical spirituality is more concerned with God or like the heaven or something outside this world, like the otherworldly concern. Weak versus great transcendence has also been discussed when it is like the spirituality is being discussed. So, for example, weak transcendence is like when we are going beyond our ordinary concerns. It can be travel, it can be like going beyond the way we see the world and like expanding it by learning a new language, etc. Versus the ultimate concerns about what happens after life, for example, after death. Another interesting phenomena is about seeker versus adherent. So seekers are those who are on the quest. Adherents are which have already found their commitment to certain kind of pathways. And it has also been seen that many times seeking leads to low commitment. So people can try out different things, and that can even lead to sometimes dissatisfaction. And some of those people do revert back to their religion. Another component in this like concept is about extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation related to spirituality. So and religion. So sometimes people have their inner motivation, but sometimes it can also be an external motivation. For example, going to a religious place based on like social connection, for example, and the community is very important for some people. And in last couple of decades, it has been seen that like now organized religions are seeing lower rates of engagement across the world. There is decreasing meaningfulness or salience in people's life about that. So this, as well as in the society also, it has become more acceptable to not have a very commitment to a particular religious path. And that can lead to polarization in the sense that people who had a lukewarm interest now don't feel the need to profess their like interest or involvement with a particular path. And therefore, people who were in the middle, for example, they are kind of shifting to either saying that, okay, they do not belong to a particular religion or like a path, or and the other ones are deeply committed. There's also some kind of increasing individualization where like people are trying out different bits and pieces of the maybe pathways, and psychologization, which they call it, like looking at religion from a very psychological lens. And this is also contributed by like in the modern secular world where like the traditional ties are weakening, and that has also leading to some of these phenomena. A lot of benefits for mental and physical health has also been seen in the research, although the findings also have been mixed in some of the studies. Looking at the Indic perspective, so broadly like Hinduism and as well as the connected traditions, if we look at how God is seen, God has been perceived with or without form, personal and impersonal, both kind of relationships. So if you see, there are three main pathways, like transcendental, which is like outside the creation, cosmic, which is like spread in everything in the creation, including within a person, and immanent, which is like within one or with the form with which like a person can have a relationship with. This was like also shared by Shaurbindu. And then these pathways, if you see, have also relationship with different like spiritual pathways or like yoga. So you can say the relationship with God-based pathways also like related to bhakti yoga. So there is a lot of space for different kind of relationships. So if you see, there's like a relationship like a friend, like a lover, like a child, master, parent, and also there's this book text like Narad Bhakti Sutra, where it has been further described. And there is a freedom to choose one's like preferred devta or ishta devta. And in fact, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that whoever comes to me through whatsoever form I reach him. There can also be change in this relationship across life stages. So like now, while growing up, you might have noticed that you had a certain connection with a certain form of God or certain quality of like a relationship, which changed and influenced by many factors. And it can meet various psychological needs and aspirations for a common person. So for sometimes people have a very deep connection with nature, for example, which is like in a way also a relationship with divine, which is very formless. And then later part in their life, for example, they go into a relationship with God, which is very personal. So some of these changes does happen. Here is a very beautiful quote by Sri Aurobindo, where he says that certainly Krishna is credited with much caprice, difficult dealings, and a playfulness or lila, which the played with do not always immediately appreciate. But there is a reasoning as well as a hidden method in his caprices. And when he does come out of it and takes a fancy to be nice to you, he has a supreme attractiveness, charm, and allurement, which compensates and more than compensates for all you have suffered. So there is a like a quality, a description of Krishna in certain way. And if you look into the Divine Mother's description, like of Mahakali, Sri Aurobindo says that for she too is the mother and her love is as intense as her wrath. And she has a deep and passionate kindness. When she's allowed to intervene in her strength, then in one moment are broken like things without consistency, the obstacles that immobilize or the enemies that assail the seeker. And this is from the Mother book. So as we see that there is a variety of metaphors, variety of imageries about the relationship with God which exists. Would you want to share, anyone if like now is open to sharing their ideas about God, or how do they connect? Anyone wants to? Or anyone wants to type in? Feel free, like the I know this is a little personal, so you can even generally say that what have you noticed? Have you noticed any changes? I see someone has said yes, but I don't know whether it is related to this question or for something else. Okay, maybe then like we'll go further, and then please feel free to share your feelings. Someone has said, Trisha has said, God for me is a source of having faith. Srividya said, sometimes the messages or conversations we have with others send us a clue to our current situation and how to overcome challenges. So yes, with children and nature for me. So broad connections like in the other humanity seeing God. Sakshi says that God for me is supreme consciousness, like the process of trusting the universe. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so let's look into how some of the common ideas about God in like the Indian tradition. God has been perceived very often as a nurturing mother. Though humans, even within this relationship of a mother-child, there is a difference in this relationship. So I wonder, have you ever come across some differentiations about type of relationship with mother? Anyone? Anyone has heard about relationship of baby monkey with their mother? Nidhi says that firstly it was confusing as a child, like there's so many forms of gods, but now everything comes together like in a supreme way. Thank you. So baby monkey, they say that holds the mother. So bhakti in a way, when you relate to God in this form, is you have to hold the God tightly. There is another kind. Kitten doesn't do anything. The mother holds the child in the mouth and takes from place to place. So this is at that absolute surrender level. Whereas like in baby monkey, there is some effort from the child. And then there's this metaphor, or like you can say description of like a bhakta, like a distracted child who is busy with the world. And once, after some time, suddenly, like if a child is given some toy and the child happily remains busy and the mother is doing something else and somewhere else. And then suddenly the child realizes that, it's been too long and the mother is not there. And then it cries and the mother comes. So they have described the God also like that in one way, that till you are busy with like your ordinary concerns and all, God is like this, simply away and like watching and all. While the moment you have these deep aspiration, and then you have this connection with God. So here are some a few examples of in the Bhakti poetry. For example, Ram Prasad, who has written like Shakti Giti, where he shares the most intimate relationship with Mother Kali. A child who can both love and quarrel with the mother, over the iniquities of human birth, or tries to. And he says that we are like ants trying to grasp the moon, and like we are trying to grasp the goddesses, like the ant tries to grasp the moon, but the moon is so far. And same way, he also has in one poem described how they want to steal Divine Mother's feet from Shiva and run so that they are not caught. And in another poem, he describes that he has a serious grievance with the Divine Mother. He says that you bestow no power of inward prayer upon this child. So you do not receive any consistent devotion from me. I no longer regard this as my fault. Only what you give me can I return to you as a sweet offering of divine remembrance. Adi Shankara has written about in Saundar Lahari that he's like an infant drinking the mother's milk. And in Namdev envisions devotion in a very bi-directional manner. Says that he's Namdev's slave and Namdev is Vishnu's slave. Similarly, Tukaram says that it is our faith that makes thee a god. To his Vithoba, Krishna's form, he talks. And Ravidas says that Hari in everything, everything in Hari. For him who knows Hari and the sense of self, no other testimony is needed. The knower is absorbed. So you see that variety of relationship and variety of connections in these descriptions with God. However, this relationship does not always go smooth due to difficulties at human level. So as Sri Aurobindo says that when the love goes towards the divine, there is still this ordinary human element in it. There is the call for a return, and if the return does not seem to come, the love may sink. There is the self-interest, the demand for the divine as a giver of all that the human being wants. And if the demands are not exceeded to, abhimana against the divine, loss of faith, loss of fervor, etc. happens. Many of us would have felt that we are asking something and we have not got it, and then we are little upset and it depends how long that feeling stays, but yes, we might get a little upset for a short period or long period and all. So there can also be a very, very transactional relationship with God. Many times people do treat that, okay, if you do this, then only I will do this. So there can be a back and forth kind of negotiation with God. So basically the human elements come in this relationship. So attempts to understand this dynamic of humans with the God has led to a variety of theories in psychology. Many factors, for example, perception of God, whether God is seen as a benevolent figure, loving, forgiving, or judging, controlling, the kind of beliefs or the amount of trust one has related to God, or behaviors, engagement in variety of actions. So there's one theory which has kind of brought together many different theories where it talks about our different developmental stages. where coexistent layers in the psyche exist, leading to a particular individual relational, like a religious style. So stage 1, it talks about based on very early childhood experiences, which is playful, open, there is a basic trust, but also shame if the rules are not followed. So feels that, okay, God requires certain rules to be followed. Stage 2 is based on a sense of separation as the child develops separation from the mother, or like has a sense of individuality from other people, and a sense idea that reciprocal need fulfillment happens. Like, so even that can go into the relationship with God, where God requires obedience. And many times it has been seen in the people who are a lot more fundamentalist. Development of loving relationship is the stage 3, where altruism, personal relationship with God also comes. But here there is a need to belong to a group. So someone who has this stage as the dominant stage can actually leave one group, but then immediately search for another group to belong to. So you can see that someone who was very deeply religious or like spiritual, and then suddenly felt hurt and upset, and then left it, and then suddenly goes to another, like maybe an intellectual group or something, and then holds on to that. So there can be need to belong to a group. Stage 4 is about seeing God as within the network of other important ideas. For example, God is important, but humanity is important, and like so in this stage, there is a reflective but also rational and skeptical approach towards spirituality and God. And while at one level, a person has a very intellectual, rational attitude towards God, there is a deep underlying unmet need for intimacy with God. So that can coexist, and that can even lead to a variety of behaviors or sometimes inconsistencies. And the stage 5 in this theory is about openness to others, variety of ideas, a sense of maturity, attitude of learning, growth, openness to variety of perspectives, and also presence of both trust and uncertainty about God. So given that this is a psychological theory, it stops here, while I'm sure that like there are much deeper and other stages also, like we'll go a little further. So this is predominantly about the quality of infant-parent relationship. And it talks about how our childhood experiences can lead to an internal belief systems of emotions, behaviors, thoughts, which are actually encoded in a deep part of the brain, limbic system, and becomes a blueprint for lifelong relationship patterns. So if someone's parent has been very sensitively attentive to or very attuned to and meets the child's needs, it can lead to a sense of security. Such a person would be open to exploring environment with a lot of confidence, and when threatened, reaches back to that safe place to find comfort, which is a description of the secure attachment. On the other hand, when a child's needs are not consistently met, it can lead to anxious or an avoidant style. So here there is a sense of distance and less trust in parents that they will be there when one needs. So this theory has also been extended to relationship with God, where God is conceptualized as a spiritual attachment figure. Proximity is sought, like closeness, when goes to murtis or does prayers or rituals or icons or objects or sacred like place. So people might have without murti or without photographs also, they can have a sacred place where they may light a candle or like meditate and all. This is especially important during times of distress, because people find sense of safety and comfort by invoking their idea of God or a higher power, presence through prayers or visiting a temple, etc. And it is quite deeply associated. Hypothesis. So one of the hypotheses is that the kind of relationship one shares with their caregivers, early caregivers, basically parents and especially mothers, can influence the internal working model, and that can influence the relationship with God. So if a person is quite secure, they can transcend their ego because they have a faith in that there are wise forces outside, and God is also a benevolent force, and they are on the right path and they can go with the flow. On the other hand, so this secure attachment is associated with better mental health. So there are a lot of studies which has been done, which is looking at like how this kind of relationship with God, deep trust and all can lead to positive self-concept, meaning in life, greater resilience, more positive affect or emotions, less psychological distress, a sense of belongingness and connectedness. But as we discussed that earlier, that there can also be troubled relationship with God. So either believe that, in general times they believe in God, but they don't feel close to God, or seeing God as a very authoritarian, punishing figure who demands obedience. There has to be rules to be followed. If you don't follow those rules consistently all the time, there's no forgiveness, like leading to guilt and all. And some examples even are present in Savitri, like, for example, the conversation between Savitri's mother and Narad, or Savitri and Yama. There are like hints towards something like this. And such troubled relationship in this theory considers that is influenced by difficult experiences with caregivers and sometimes even trauma, and can lead to anxious avoidant attachment with God. And a lot of studies, as I mentioned earlier, is like has been done on relationship with God, and which when troubled relationships are there, can lead to poor mental health. For example, a sense of struggling with a sense of abandonment by God, or spiritual disappointments, discontent, fear about punishment by God, low religious engagement, lower life purpose, low social trust, and even psychiatric symptoms, negative emotions. It can go further to self-harm, general social anxiety, obsessions, compulsions, etc. And quite a number of studies have been done in this area. So question is there no hope? Anyone wants to take a answer, share their thoughts? Is there no hope? Or do you think there is a hope? And build a better relationship, more intimate, more close with God, where you feel God's presence, or a connection. Reach out to God when you're feeling distressed. So there is hope as per the compensation hypothesis. So some people whose parents, caregivers were either lacking or were absent go on to develop a deeply positive, intimate relationship with God. And this relationship actually can fill the psychological need and can be seen as a secure attachment, which in turn can lead to better interpersonal relationship in real life also. So here basically is compensation, where when early childhood experiences were not great, and then you develop a relationship with God, which then can make you feel more secure, and then it can translate to better real life relationships. And if you look into a long history of Bhakti saints in India, many of the saints, in fact, when I was looking into this, most of the saints I knew have had some difficulty in their childhood. So if you look closely, many of their childhood was difficult, either early death of one or both parents, abandonment, or later adoption or caregiving by other people. So Shividya also says that I feel that troubles in life leads you to spirituality, and it's also true in my experience and many others I know. And Sakshi says that I feel hope is about being able to see various possibilities in the most difficult times. Maybe that comes with a stable anchor and consistency. Yes. So there's some bit of work to be done, but that is possibility. And here I will share with you what I have found with Bhakti saints. So if you see, there is this group saints who have lost both parents quite early. Nivritinath, Dhyaneshwar, Sopan Dev and Muktabai, they were siblings. And both of their parents committed suicide when they were very young. Tukaram, death of both parents by teenage. Narsim Mehta, death of both parents by age 5. Eknath, death of both parents in young age. Tulsidas, abandoned by parents. Later, caretaker also died. Nabadas, the death of both parents by age 5. Then there are those who lost one parent early. Shankardev, death of father at age 7, death of mother before or after, raised by grandmother. So, Appar, orphan, raised by older sister. Ramkrish Paramahans, death of father at age 7. Adi Shankara, death of father in young age. Raman Maharshi, death of father by age 13. Paramahans Yoganand, death of mother at age 11. Kamal Kant Bhattacharya, again young age. Gyanbai, Kanu Patra. And then there are saints who had separation or some sense kind of abandonment or like going away, like parents being away. So Kabir was abandoned in a basket. That's a famous story. Namdev was found floating in the river, was adopted. Andal was found in a garden. Famous Tamil poet Namalvar, parents left him at the feet of deity although for a short time, then they got the message from the deity and then they came and they took back. Vallabh, parents left under the tree, mistaken to be not alive. I think I'm a little confused with these two. This story about parents came back. So Sundar adopted, Vyastirth sent to Guru very early by parents, and Sharvindo was separated also at age 7 and sent to abroad with older brother. And he also had quite difficult this thing because while growing up they were always resources were few and all. And they say that Query mother had some difficulties. So as we see that most of the famous saints whom we know, read about, whose work we have read or we follow, have had some difficult childhood. Apart from that, later positive relationship, for example, romantic or marriage, etc., can also bring a sense of security and change this model. And that can also translate into a deeper connection with God. Some recent work also indicate there is a bidirectional, as I said, that influence on human relationship, God relationship, but also there is a presence of spiritual instability, grandiosity, and the field is still developing. But it's very relevant in our context. The other kind of relationship I would want to talk about is a cosmic form of God, so which is the Vishwarupa form. If you go read Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9 to 11, has a great vision of cosmic God and very beautiful, very and in fact, the Arjun, when he talks about, it's a prayer, in fact, in chapter 11 of this Vishwarupa of God, after seeing that, Sri Aurobindo says that it's one of the most beautiful poetry in Sanskrit. And this kind of effect when he sees that this can be described as awe. And when someone reads, they can also feel that experience. So awe is an overwhelming feeling of reverence, admiration, fear, etc., produced by something which is grand, sublime, extremely powerful. Or in everyday basis, when people experience that, very often it is about a beautiful sunrise or sunset or a powerful fall, waterfall, etc. and all. However, it can also be about watching the starlit sky or a form Vishwarupa form, reading the description. And awe has been linked with multiple psychological benefits, from making one feel connected to the other people in humanity, decreasing materialism, making people more generous, cooperative. People can become more humble also, enhances the sense of time, as if you are in a timeless space, improves health, mood, sense of satisfaction, critical thinking, while also bringing sense of humility. So going a little further, before we end, is about role of prayers. Anyone wants to share anything about prayers? Do you engage in a very a chant or something, or do you have writing letters to God or something, or anything else? I see someone says chants, yes. Anyone else wants to share? So M1 has said praying a lot. It gives me comfort. Yes. So looking at the role of prayers, prayers can be very different, like a wide variety of prayers like can be there based on content and purpose and all. I see there's one more someone has shared. Has also said like when from the heart it is direct connection. Yes. Beautiful. So it can have focus on oneself or other people. So when someone prays for another person, it's called intercessory prayer. And there's some very interesting research where they first looked into the patient with heart disease, and they found that there was better health outcomes in those people who were being prayed. And then there was some criticism, and another study was done with so overall the research, although is still upcoming, but it's a very interesting, very fascinating area. And people who feel that or who know that they are being prayed do report feeling subjectively better. Then prayer can differ on the subject of prayer. It can have very specific request, or it can be a very general prayer. Object of prayer, it can be to a specific deity, to God, or to the universe in general. Level of formality involved, it can be informal, very conversational, very specific rituals, behaviors, context can also be present. And then there is a very, very fascinating difference in the type of prayers and what kind of outcomes it can have. So there can be prayers which are very God focused, where you are saying thanks to God or adore God or very receptive meditative state. So your focus is on the God. And many of the chants, if you see, are about this kind of adoration. So you can have a Vishnu Sahasranam or Lalita Sahasranam, or many of these chants are about how the variety of forms and descriptions of God. So adoration, or you visit a place of, for example, a temple, or another place where the form of God is there, or some kind of image of God is there, or something which is sacred is there. For example, in Gurudwara and Guru Granth Sahib is there. So prayer of gratitude is there, adoration is there, and then you have a receptive meditative type of prayers. Then there is an ego-focused prayer, so which is petitionary. You request for something, you're asking for something. Or there's a confessionary, where there you're seeing that you've done something and you're feeling bad about it and all, or a ritualistic prayer. Interestingly, there are some slight difference in the outcome. Some more meaning and purpose was found with the God-focused prayer, because in the process you are kind of stepping out of your time space limited life, where with certain concerns, and you are going beyond that and focusing on the God. So there was when studies showed a better outcome. And this is very, very fascinating research I found about the type of prayer and how the outcomes differ based on that. And looking at the future directions, not much work in this area in India. There was one study related to bhakti and cultivating anasakti by Chandur and Sri Ram. And then we are also doing some data collection as well as using in psychotherapy. There is need to explore whether attachment to God in Indian context is attachment to multiple parental figure, like a joint family with different relationship with different gods, as I initially said that. And whether how the relationship changes with age, life experiences, why there is a rupture in relationship sometimes, you suddenly feel distant from God, or exit even happens, people stop praying. And how do we use this in psychological intervention? So I would just briefly share one example where there was one client who had come for anxiety and depression and all. He was around in late age, like around 65 to 67. And he had stopped praying to his favorite god, like because he was very angry, because there was certain life situations which were difficult, and he was very angry with God. And like that has actually removed another source of support for him. And with work where we did therapy and all, we also included this aspect. And then we not directly, but kind of indirectly we discussed and sharing about his feelings and writing letter and all and all. And then finally, on his own, after a few sessions, when he shared that he has restarted prayers, as well as going back to his earlier way of connecting to God. So, which added to his sense of well-being. So therefore, it's a very important area, although less understood. So I will end with this. Thank you. And I acknowledge a lot of people and forces behind this presentation. Thank you. Stop sharing. In case you have some questions or any, would you want to share your thoughts?
Can I ask something?
Please, please.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I have it's a very nice presentation, and just in the context of Indian philosophy and psychology, something interdisciplinary like that. So I am wondering, if we see from the Western perspective, there are certain metrics they are utilizing. Suppose this Telgen, the scale of absorption, or spiritual transcendence index, something like that. So where Indian philosophy stands in comparison, or it is in convergent, or it is in parallel?
Okay. So as compared to the current research in the the modern psychology, or you can say American or Western European psychology, there is a certain, you can say, philosophy which comes behind that, and a particular kind of worldview which leads to certain interpretations. So my understanding would be that Indian philosophy can contribute a lot more in this area. However, at this moment, we are not there. We are not having enough people who are working in this area to have their voices. And so this is one thing, because scales do have their limitations. Scales, when they are being built, also have their own biases. There are ways to look into certain things. And therefore, qualitative kind of studies would be required. They would be required for, for example, first-person research, more openness about one's own experiences, documenting them. And the few studies which we have done using some of these scales, we have found that some of even the words are hard to translate, and way to understand them in the general population becomes difficult. So some of those same scales, when it is used in Indian context, the results may not be really valid fully. So each scale has to be really tested first for its results and interpretations.
Okay, thank you.
Jyoti says there are no more questions, so maybe I can make a few comments. One of the most interesting things I heard today was the large number of saints and sages and spiritual masters have a history of either having lost both parents or one parent, or having been abandoned and separated. So it applies not only to ordinary people like us who find that misfortune is very often the trigger for turning to the spiritual path. So many spiritual masters who came with the preparation to go to that level based on the homework in the previous lives also needed or at least experienced that type of a trigger. Maybe they did not need it, but maybe they also designed their life in such a way to set an example for the rest. That's also possible. But that was a very interesting observation, which I was not aware of, that so many of them have had that type of a history. Another misconception I thought which I can clear is that it's often felt that the Sanatana Dharma, or what is commonly called Hinduism, has a large number of gods. In fact, this tradition is very strongly and vehemently a believer in one God, called by various names, maybe Brahman or Paramatma or Purushottam, but it is one God, and the large number of gods that we hear about are either synonyms of that one God, or they are emanations or powers of that one God with the different attributes. But basically, God is one. That is something which Sanatana Dharma and the philosophy that emerges from it, principally Vedanta, believes in. The third interesting observation was a worldwide trend of moving from religions towards spirituality. This is in keeping with Sri Aurobindo's vision that this will happen. And in fact, it's a healthy trend. And the reason why it is happening is that young people who are now being born in much larger numbers with a more highly evolved consciousness do not like to get involved in outer activity. Religious activity is more outside, spirituality is more within. They do not like the outer symbols in terms of dress code and so on and so forth. And they do not want to participate in rituals and ceremonies which they may not understand or feel that they're completely irrational or unnecessary. And they want to go more within, and that is what spirituality is about. And that also is something that is common to all religions. So all religions do have an underlying spiritual philosophy. And with respect to that, the differences between religions are very little. The differences are more in relation to the outer things like rituals and ceremonies, or in relation to the history of the religion in terms of the various legends and myths that build around the religion, and they keep growing with time. So this trend worldwide, in fact, there was a few years back, every year the Times magazine brings out a special issue on 10 ideas that are changing the world. And a few years ago, this annual issue had mentioned one out of these 10 ideas was the growth of nuns. Nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N-S. Growth of nuns, N-O-N-E-S, nuns. Now, who are these nuns? These are people who openly say that I am spiritual, I believe in a higher power, but I do not have any allegiance to any organized religion. This is the fastest growing tribe in the world, particularly the Western world. And this is something which is, in fact, very much in keeping with Sri Aurobindo's vision, as well as something which predicts a much brighter future for the world. Because although the overall influence of religions has been positive, there have also been conflicts between religions, and they're basically about the external features of the religions. And therefore, if people do not give much importance to that and start going within, start practicing what an inner life for inner development, so that they move to a greater appreciation of that higher power and bring that into their daily lives, the world will become a much better place to live in. Essentially, a world which will be full of much more love. That is what the type of world Sri Aurobindo and Nimadhara visualized. And finally, I would like to thank Jyotsna for presenting a topic that was not only complex, but could also be controversial and sensitive. But she handled it in a very broad way, not in a way that was totally impartial, unbiased. Even if she had a bias, she kept it to herself, which is the right thing to do, because you have to respect all other points of view also, and therefore she kept her bias to herself, even if it was there. And I think she presented in a way that respected everybody's sensibility. That's a great achievement in a talk like this. I finally hand over to Aditi. I'm sure she would have something to say before she closes this session.
I just have a lot of appreciation and gratitude because, as most of you know, that this is what I've dedicated my life to kind of bring psychology and spirituality together. And when we hear talks like this, it just kind of motivates that something in the form is also happening in terms of research, and people are creating also material, because we have also often spoken about first person research is so subjective, what to do, what not to do. But I think in gatherings like this, when people come in, even if they take away that yes, there's a possibility, that is also, I think, the purpose is solved. So a lot of heartfelt gratitude to you for doing this today, and thank you everyone for attending. Thank you. We just end with a moment of silence. Thank you.